173,000 South Dakotans are working in either ag or ag-related industries. That's 40% of our workforce. So clearly, ag is the elephant in the room, if you will, when it comes to the economy of South Dakota. I grew up on a farm in southeastern South Dakota. My grandparents came from Denmark in 1911 and bought a little quarter-section farm near Del Rapids. My dad was born on that farm and grew up there with his brother and sisters, and my two sisters and I grew up on that farm. When I was a boy, we had cattle and hogs and chickens, and during my grade school years and early high school, we milked cows. I worked the fields. I know what it's like to get up in the morning and shovel silage when it's 30 below zero and the steaming heap is keeping you warm. I know what it's like to shovel other materials in the hog house too. So I've been there. I've lived agriculture, and it's been part of my life. I went to a one-room country school near Del Rapids through 7th grade till it was consolidated into the Del Rapids High School. That's where I met Linda. My wife Linda is here. I met Linda in 8th grade when I moved to Del Rapids, or when I started going to school in Del Rapids, and we dated through high school. When I graduated, I also experienced some of the tough times in agriculture. We had some economic problems, and my parents had to auction the livestock and equipment. Because Dad had inherited a third of the farm and bought 2/3 from his brother and sister, he was able to hang on to the home quarter where we lived by taking work in town. Sioux Falls is about 30 miles away, and Dad started driving back and forth from Augustana, where he was a janitor. Some of you know my parents were deaf. They were born deaf, so sign language was our first language at our home. And when you're deaf, the number of jobs, the pool of jobs that's available to you is a little bit more limited. So again, Dad became a janitor, and a couple years later, my mom became a janitor at Augustana, and they were commuting from the farm back and forth every day for the rest of their working careers. That happened about the time I went to college, and so I was on my own. I went down to USD, worked my way through school, washing dishes for my meals, running errands, working as a welder on the Load King assembly line, and welding and painting water towers. That's how I paid for my schooling. When I graduated, I attended law school in Chicago. Again, I worked my way through school. I was a security guard on weekends. I ran errands for a law firm, and I even got a commercial bus driver's license, and I was a bus driver for the Chicago Transit Authority. After graduation, I moved back to South Dakota, married my high school girlfriend, Linda. A couple years later, we had a daughter, and then we bought the building site from my family on the farm. We moved into the old farmhouse with my parents, and we had somebody dig a hole across the yard and pour a foundation, and then Linda and I built our own home right on the farm there with our own hands. I was working in banking at that time. I worked at the bank all day and came home and worked on the house. And after the house was complete, we moved across the yard. We had another daughter, Sarah, and then our son, Chris, and raised 3 great kids who lived right across the yard from their grandma and grandpa for the rest of their lives. In the working world, I spent 10 years in banking, and then I left the bank to go to work for Children's Home Society, a nonprofit organization that serves abused and neglected children. I worked for them even as I was involved in politics until just last November, when I left to campaign full-time. On the political side of things, I became involved in politics when I was elected to the state senate in 1996. That's where I met Governor Rounds. We served together for those 2 years. We were both re-elected. He's from Pierre, state senator. I was from the Del Rapids area. And then when in 2002, after I'd been in the Senate 6 years, he asked me to join his ticket. We ran in 2002. Were re-elected in 2006, and I'm now in my 8th year as lieutenant governor. I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm looking forward to the forum. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thank you. And now the opening statement, Democrat Scott Heidefrom. Scott.
Thank you, Jerry, and I'd like to thank WNEX and SDSU for the great partnership the two of you have formed in putting together these debates. It's really terrific for the chance to come together and talk about our ideas for agriculture. It's really a great time to celebrate agriculture in South Dakota. It is what we are about. If there was any question in anybody's mind if we were still a farm state, all you had to do is watch how South Dakota was resilient when it came to the economic downturn, and how we're coming back largely because the farm economy in South Dakota has been so terrific. And we owe it all to you, and we're very grateful to you. I'd like to tell you a little about myself. I grew up in Miller, South Dakota, just up the road here a ways. My dad was a lawyer, and while I can't claim to be a farmer or to have grown up on a farm, when you grow up in a town like Miller, you spend an awful lot of time working on farms. So while in Miller, I dehorned cattle, castrated, painted fence, picked rocks, hauled bales, all through the summertime. And then there were times when I went down and lived on my uncle's farm in Mission Hill, Lawrence and Nancy Nelson, and did much the same thing there, working for them. Again, I was sort of at the bottom rung in terms of agriculture and labor, but I was very proud to hold those jobs and to learn what I could about farming and ranching. After growing up in Miller and graduating from Miller High School, I went to the University of South Dakota. And while I was there, I joined a fraternity, and Dennis Daugaard was one of the guys in the fraternity. And one of the things I did in the fraternity to pay for my college is I got half my room and board paid for by doing dishes in the fraternity house. So when Dennis talks about the fact that he was doing dishes, I like to remind people that I was doing Dennis's dishes. And I thought the University of South Dakota was a great place for a kid like me from Miller, South Dakota. And I came back and practiced law with my dad then for 12 years. Susie and I started our family there. Susie's here with me today. We started our family with our two kids, born in '87 and '91. Susie started a business on Main Street in Miller, and that was during the farm crisis in the mid-'80s, and it was a tough time in agriculture, a tough time in small towns, but we loved it, and it was a great chance for us. As a lawyer, I did an awful lot of Schedule F farm returns, and I represented farmers in courts throughout South Dakota, and I really got to love that. And in fact, in later years, I continued to do it after we moved to Sioux Falls. I had the privilege of representing farmers down in the Freeman and Marion area when they wanted to start their own ethanol plant and were being resisted. We went to court and we won for those farmers, and now the Millennium Plant is a reality. I represented farmers up and down the Jim River Valley when TransCanada came in to condemn their property to put a crude oil pipeline underneath South Dakota. We went to court and we fought for fair compensation, and we received fair compensation for every one of those farmers, and I was really proud to be able to do that. I've also fought for agriculture in the halls of the legislature, whether again it's to make sure that we keep our environment safe from crude oil pipelines, or whether it's any one of the major areas of legislation that I was involved in agriculture. I've been very proud to work with farmers side by side in the state of South Dakota. I want to tell you that my agenda is to continue working as hard as I can for agriculture, but my agenda is a little different because we've got real problems in South Dakota. We face a budget crisis of $107 million, the worst crisis we've ever faced in South Dakota. Dennis and I disagree about whether that's even a crisis. I think it is, and so did the other 4 Republicans who ran for that office. Dennis doesn't use that kind of language to characterize a $107 million deficit in South Dakota. We've grown state government dramatically, and we're going to talk about those issues more because my agenda is a very different one about careful management of the resources of South Dakota. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you both. As we start into questions, again, if you have a question, the folks over here will collect them. They have a pen and paper for you to write a question. And the first one we'll start with, and we'll start with Dennis Daugaard in this particular round. And this is from the audience, and it notes recent events here that the federal money that has come to Statesway, $26 million specifically for education. And the question, the way this is put,